Namaste. Well, in recent chapters, Sri Aurobindo is building a picture suitable for the human mind of what it looks like to climb towards the supramental consciousness. And now we have come to chapter 27, the Gnostic being. And we deal here with what he calls the impossibilities. Because the transition from a divided mental consciousness, whatever stratum of the mind in which you dwell, to the overmind is already gigantic. It is challenging, outstripping, because we have to give up personal views and become cosmic in nature. We have to have the capacity to willingly release former limitations in that bold ascent to a new form of being. But if living widely, if living in the rays of a cosmic sun is difficult for the human, if that grade of consciousness is only rarely attained, hardly glimpsed, almost never embodied until Sri Aurobindo achieved that in 1926, then what more to say about the ascent into the supramental consciousness? To transit from the overmind into the supermind is to cross a transversal. It's to make a transition from a divided way of being into a true unitive being. To move from what is finite into what is infinite. But not simply in terms of our vision, because while the Gnostic consciousness, which belongs to the supramental, has truth inherent within it, the overmind is stretching upwards to achieve it. And at its grandest vision, even when it speaks and realizes oneness, still its power of efficacy is limited. But when we reach the consciousness of the supramental, it is not simply a matter of awareness unrestricted. It is also a matter that endless streams of power and effectuation flow through the being. So consciousness and power become one in the Gnostic consciousness. And it regards all from oneness. It does not search from oneness. It does not begin from division and multiply and add, subtract a few here, add a few more there, trying to achieve some sense of commonality. It lives in oneness. And so this too differentiates it from a mental approach, which might conceive of what oneness might be, but cannot realize it. Mind approaches oneness from the standpoint of division. It tries to construct unity. Unity in the supramental consciousness is self-born. It exists within itself, Swayambhu. So Sri Aurobindo says this then makes it virtually impossible for us to speak about it meaningfully. We can't capture it in words, which hardly suffice to tell us of our own experience and shared experience with others. But we can say something about it. And he offers a preliminary description here in this chapter of what the supramental nature might be. What would this Gnostic consciousness built on true knowledge, gnosis being the Greek word for knowledge, what would this be like? And so we might begin with a short passage from this chapter on page 101, if I can find it here. 1001, haha. This passage is the stage at which the supermind gnosis can take over the lead of the evolution from the overmind and build the first foundations of its own characteristic manifestation and unveiled activities. It must be marked, therefore, by a decisive but long prepared transition from an evolution in the ignorance to an always progressive evolution in the knowledge. It will not be a sudden revelation and effectuation of the absolute supermind and the supramental being as they are in their own plane, the swift apocalypse of a truth-conscious existence, ever self-fulfilled and complete in self-knowledge. It will be the phenomenon of the supramental being descending into a world of evolutionary becoming and forming itself there, unfolding the powers of the gnosis within the terrestrial nature. This is indeed the principle of all terrestrial being, for the process of Earth existence is the play of an infinite reality, concealing itself first in a succession of obscurely limited, opaque, and incomplete half-figures, which by their imperfection and character of disguise distort the truth of which they are in labor, but afterwards arriving more and more at half-luminous figures of itself, which can become, once there is the supramental descent, a true progressive revelation. The descent from original supermind, the assumption of evolutionary supermind, is a step which the supramental gnosis can very well undertake and accomplish without changing its own essential character. So, to put it simply, coming into this natural world, it can advance step by step at appropriate auspicious moments, the proceeding evolution based on revelation of truth. It comes with that. It can assume possession of the current vehicle as it is and put forward what is possible in the moment. Veils will be successively lifted. It doesn't have to be an apocalyptic movement when we go flash from ignorance into knowledge, but rather a gradual process which the accommodating nature, which is being transformed, can accept, appreciate, and enjoy. So the evolutionary formula then will be retained. How it is that a higher consciousness or power meets a material encasement and encourages the sleeping powers inside it to come forward will be replicated with the supramental as well. But eventually, it will succeed in establishing Gnostic beings on earth. That is, beings will exist in bodies which are supramentally aware, which see and act from truth. Their natures will be unclouded by what has so often pockmarked the advance of human evolution. The descent from above, this supramental energy, this consciousness, prepares, of course, self-realized beings. They must know who and what they are. They must know what the order of the world is. They cannot be strangers to the cosmic consciousness. It must be part and parcel of their own outlook and awareness. But to achieve this fully, an evolution supportive from this side, from our side, must have opened up in advance all the subliminal passages within. The aspiring individual reaching for the supramental consciousness must have consummated the search for the individual soul inside, know what is in them that is divine, must recognize generally the broad consciousness of the Atman, of Brahman, exhibited everywhere throughout existence, be one with that universal awareness, and be receptive to what wants to lean into us from above. So, one of the consequences of this, Sri Aurobindo writes, is that the inconscience will begin to yield ground to the approaching supramental force and awareness. The inconscience, having met its twin from above, begins to disappear, begins to evaporate. So ignorance does not exist in a supramental consciousness. And so what ground can it have from the inconscient then? How can the inconscient stand if ignorance is not its expressive tool? Inconscience begins to go. Gnostic nature begins to come. It obtains. It begins to rule. And it brings to consummation earlier steps that have been taken. So it is not simply a spiritual attainment inwardly in our consciousness. This descent of a supramental awareness would do all things at once, would it not? Because it is an expressive dynamic power of Satchit Ananda. The supramental is how, you might say, Satchit Ananda considers itself, thinks, and disposes its infinite powers into illimitable manifestation. So, one of the effects here in the Gnostic nature would be to harmonize and hedonize the evolutionary emergence of these powers. So it would bring delight, and not simply the passive delight, but an active, joyful leap from experience to experience. The fiery clutches of bliss would be upon us and among us. And while the overmind creation, which precedes it, might be a protected province, defending itself against the ignorance around, and feeling an innate oneness with everything, but also enforcing its separate right to exist so that it doesn't become polluted or dulled. The supermind does not work like that. The supermind creates a harmonic unity in the person, so it becomes personal, and in its collective embrace of the world. So this might be a good place to read another little section from this. Uh, Page 1006. A supramental or Gnostic race of beings would not be a race made according to a single type, molded in a single fixed pattern. For the law of the supermind is unity fulfilled in diversity, and therefore there would be an infinite diversity in the manifestation of the Gnostic consciousness, although that consciousness would still be one in its basis, in its constitution, in its all-revealing and all-uniting order. It is evident that the triple status of the supermind would reproduce itself as a principle in this new manifestation. There would be below it, and yet belonging to it, the degrees of the overmind and intuitive gnosis with the souls that had realized these degrees of the ascending consciousness. There would be also at the summit, as the evolution in knowledge proceeded, individual beings who would ascend beyond a supermind formulation and reach from the highest height of supermind to the summits of Unitarian self-realization in the body, which must be the last and supreme state of the epiphany of the creation. So that, of course, means coursing beyond the highest realm of the triple status of the supermind, from that which leans towards diversity, beyond that which balances oneness and diversity, beyond that which holds diversity within it but maintains oneness, beyond all of this into sheer Satchit Ananda. But this must become, in the future, a condition of our bodily consciousness, that all the principles of existence must proceed in order to reveal and manifest themselves in an unending evolution. We don't know what the end of it is, so let's just say unending for the moment. So, the Gnostic individual then consummates the spiritual personhood, knows the self, the ground of all being, which underlies every plane of being, utterly one, but supports too the individual manifestation, but also knows this as a transcendence, as a universality. So the Gnostic individual would find its center not only in itself, but in all the world, in all the cosmos, in all beings in the cosmos, beyond the cosmos, in the transcendence from which both universe and individual manifest. So this must all be fulfilled at once in the living body of the Gnostic being. So this literally is a translation into solid material fact of that idea of Giordano Bruno from centuries back. An infinite existence whose center is everywhere. So, complete self-knowledge brings something more with it, because in the supramental consciousness, it's not just consciousness. There, it is also power. So, utter self-knowledge must bring complete self-mastery. One becomes sovereign over the whole nature, the dynamic will, the receptive and obedient frame that we call the body. And here, in the way that we're currently evolving, we need some limitation within our own structure, within our own self-definition, to achieve something like perfection. We don't know how to progress and how to attain a goal unless we're limited and if the goal is achievable. But in a supramental consciousness, it is not so. There, we do more than simply see, we also do. There is a self-effectuating power based on this self-knowledge, this one truth, which stretches endlessly, but with which we are not simply in communion, but in utter union. So we would, in this world, living in a body, had we a Gnostic consciousness, be able to affect a cosmic will as appropriate through our individuated form from utter mastery and not seeking uh, our way through blind corridors to get to the means by which we succeed, but through authentic ownership of it, real possession of it in our own consciousness. So necessarily, we would act from a personal standpoint, but from cosmic oneness, expressing a transcendent will. So, this differentiates us from how we typically work in the world with a mental will, some limited understanding of things, trying to move forward, meeting the cosmic forces and being beaten down. We feel defeated. We feel uplifted for the moment. But with the supramental, we would not feel crushed by the world because there is no ego in the supramental being. There is no demarcation that I only am this small thing. There is instead a cosmic flow that is part of and apparent to the personal self. And so, unwalled selfdom, unwalled, uninhibited power, unrestrained delight can all be appreciated and experienced in the bodily consciousness of this Gnostic being. So the universal and the individual are capable of expressing transcendence. Delight distinguishes Gnostic life from the mental life. I will turn again to Sri Aurobindo's beautiful language and read from page 1011 for a moment. One in self with all, the supramental being will seek the delight of self-manifestation of the Spirit in himself, but equally the delight of the divine in all. He will have the cosmic joy and will be a power for bringing the bliss of the Spirit, the joy of being to others. For their joy will be part of his own joy of existence. To be occupied with the good of all beings, to make the joy and grief of others one's own, has been described as a sign of the liberated and fulfilled spiritual man. The supramental being will have no need for that of an altruistic self-effacement, since this occupation will be intimate to his self-fulfillment, the fulfillment of the one in all, and there will be no contradiction or strife between his own good and the good of others, nor will he have any need to acquire a universal sympathy by subjecting himself to the joys and griefs of creatures in the ignorance. His cosmic sympathy will be part of his inborn truth of being and not dependent on a personal participation in the lesser joy and suffering. It will transcend what it embraces, and in that transcendence will be its power. His feeling of universality, his action of universality will be always a spontaneous state and natural movement, an automatic expression of the truth, an act of the joy of the Spirit's self-existence. There could be in it no place for limited self or desire, or for the satisfaction or frustration of the limited self, or the satisfaction or frustration of desire, no place for the relative and dependent happiness and grief that visit and afflict our limited nature. For these are things that belong to the ego and the ignorance, not to the freedom and truth of the Spirit. The Gnostic being has the will of action, but also the knowledge of what is to be willed and the power to effectuate its knowledge. It will not be led from ignorance to do what is not to be done. So in this Gnostic being, there is no place for limited play. There is no place for unwanted and unnecessary constriction. Similarly, as he states, with will and the flow of force, there too, there is an intent behind the cosmos that is hidden to the mind, life, and body as currently they exist. But in a Gnostic being, there is no need to accommodate those restrictions. But the inner life of the Gnostic being heals the inside and the outside. The division between self and world. We live in the universe then and we carry the universe inside us. Inwardly, psychologically, through all the caverns, all the linkages in the subliminal being, but not simply in a state of awareness, but also dynamically. Action extends outward. Each stage unfolds new power, fresh will, unexpected joy. And since the knowledge that we experience in the Gnostic consciousness is knowledge by identity, the identical will uncover the identity in all. So each experience, as we move through, we see a guise of the divine, but a guise that reveals, that no longer conceals. And we appreciate deeply, not even with compassion, because we are one with it, what the intent is in that individual formation as it reveals itself progressively in the flow of time. Whatever that conscious entity is that inhabits that body and then discards it, proceeds on. No grief, no sorrow, because nothing has been lost. To us, in a divided consciousness, living in the limits of our temporal awareness, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, and it comes too soon always. And we weren't prepared for it. This has no license in that consciousness. We live inside, but we live inside the universe, and the universe lives inside us. And action extends outwardly from our inmost being. So idea, vision, perception, all change in the Gnostic consciousness. But the dynamic parts of us too, the life power in us, undergoes a tremendous shift. If the mind becomes open to the far horizons of what stretches beyond overmind, receptive to it, the consciousness force, that which is above, which energizes the supramental, will come to act in the personal life as it affects the collective life, as both pour out into the global life. And our experience of love will be no more the shabby thing that it is now, where the formal relations depend on the form. Rather, love will be the union of self with self, of self with world. It will be a vibrant expression of ananda, of delight. There is a reversal of consciousness in reaching any of these grades of higher consciousness, from the higher mind all the way up to the overmind and beyond into the supramental. But the reversal has also to reveal the inherent sleeping powers which exist in the body and in the life, so that they too can have knowledge of what their sleeping divinity has been all along. So it must inhabit the body. The spirit rules. And what is the spirit? It is not simply an abstract consciousness watching things from afar. It is a real idea. It is, in the Vedic conception, that reality making awareness, which is dynamic and always smooth and harmonious and truthful in its expression. That real idea accepts how it must behave here and now to reveal what must come out, and on the way, it exerts more and more power to govern. And this is an expression again of the conscious force, Chit Shakti, an expressive power of the supreme nature, the supernature, Satchit Ananda at the height, supermind in the middle, and these worlds ranging below, all to be reconnected through the power and the force of the evolution led by the questing soul of the spiritual aspirant. And that would be you. That would be you. So I know I've only reached halfway through this chapter. We'll continue next time, still in chapter 27. We have two big things to consider right at the start. We want to look at what about the mystery of personality and what is the right thing to do. So, next time with that, I appreciate your patience. As always, I do. I'm always grateful to you. So, a small section from Savitri, and we continue where we have been. Ah, Book 2, the Book of the Traveler of the Worlds, Canto 14, The World Soul. Tonight we have to conclude the passage. Maybe we start again from the beginning. We're on page 295. There he beheld in their mighty unions poise the figure of the deathless two in one, a single being in two bodies clasped, a diarchy of two united souls, seated absorbed in deep creative joy. Their trance of bliss sustained the mobile world. Behind them, in a morning dusk, one stood, who brought them forth from the unknowable. Ever disguised, she awaits the seeking spirit, watcher on the supreme unreachable peaks, guide of the traveler of the unseen paths. She guards the austere approach to the alone. At the beginning of each far-spread plain, pervading with her power the cosmic suns, she reigns, inspirer of its multiple works, and thinker of the symbol of its scene. Above them all she stands, supporting all, the sole omnipotent goddess ever veiled, of whom the world is the inscrutable mask. The ages are the footfalls of her tread, their happenings the figure of her thoughts, and all creation is her endless act. His spirit was made a vessel of her force, Mute in the fathomless passion of his will, he outstretched to her his folded hands of prayer. Then, in a sovereign answer to his heart, a gesture came as of worlds thrown away, and from her raiment's lustrous mystery raised one arm, half parted the eternal veil. A light appeared still and imperishable. Attracted to the large and luminous depths of the ravishing enigma of her eyes, he saw the mystic outline of a face. Overwhelmed by her implacable light and bliss, an atom of her illimitable self, mastered by the honey and lightning of her power, tossed towards the shores of her ocean ecstasy, drunk with a deep golden spiritual wine, he cast from the rent stillness of his soul a cry of adoration and desire, and the surrender of his boundless mind, and the self-giving of his silent heart. He fell down at her feet, unconscious, prone. End of Canto 14. Dear all, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you soon. Send any critiques, any criticisms. Happy to receive all and sundry. Much love to you. Namaste. Jai Ma.